And tonight is a little different than we've been doing for the last, has it been 2 years? Year and a half? It's been a while. We've been doing this online book club, no reading required, and that's going to continue. But tonight is a little different. We're trying some new format things. Earlier this evening at my church at 7 p.m., we started a video series called The Case for Christmas by Lee Strobel. And this video series complements his book, which is also The Case for Christmas. This one, Pastor Thomas and myself are using as the inspiration for our Sunday sermons. So this past Sunday, Pastor Thomas preached about eyewitness and answered the question, can the biographies of Jesus be trusted? Really, the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, can we trust what they said? Was their eyewitness account credible? Why is it credible? This coming Sunday, I will be preaching out of the scientific evidence, specifically looking at archaeology and what does the archaeology of the time period of Jesus say about the biblical writings of the New Testament authors. So that's this book. And paralleled with that, using some of the same information, is the video series. Tonight we started with looking at the words and understanding of what Jesus said. So the chapter is actually called, or the video was called, Setting the Record Straight. And we're going to get into what we talked about. My first question from the group study, though, is what is your absolute favorite Christmas movie? Alex, I already know yours. Go to the mic. Go to the mic. So one of the things we're doing with this whole beta testing, you can't see them, but there is a number of people here in person, and we have a mic up so that they can be a part of the discussion. Not everybody's going to jump on and talk necessarily, but those who do, you'll get to hear their voice. So let's try this.
Is it working?
I hear you.
Excellent. So my favorite Christmas movie would be the Alistair Sims story. So
you make me so happy. That's not what I thought you were going to say.
I didn't hear what you said. You spoke in a mic.
He said the Alistair Sims black and white Christmas Carol.
Oh.
I was expecting him to say the 80s most male classic favorite Christmas movie of Die Hard with Bruce Willis. That's what I was expecting. My Aunt Sharon has put in the Nativity Story, and I believe that's the one that came out mid-2000s. Do I have a favorite? Our good friend Jeremy just put in Batman Returns. I have to say, like, for Christmas movies, it's one of those, whatever Christmas movie I'm watching, that's my favorite in the moment. Be it It's a Wonderful Life, or some of the more modern ones like Arthur Christmas, I think is a very sweet family Christmas movie. I've liked Netflix has done some of the Christmas Chronicles with Kurt Russell. Yeah. Disney has from I like the classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Frosty the Snowman and all the claymation. But sometimes when I'm watching these movies, and this is the point of Jeremy's mom loves The Muppets Christmas, I will confess I've never seen it. Maybe this will be the year. My other aunt, my Aunt Penny's favorite Christmas movies, maybe not her favorite, but the ones she got me turned on to are, and they're on Disney Plus, they're like 30 minutes or shorter video clips, are the Prep and Landing, where it's these two elves that go into the house and get the house ready for Santa, and all of the hijinks that ensue with their job to prep the house. It's cute. One of the things that he brings up is sometimes we're used to a Christmas movie and it might even be playing on spiritual themes, something like It's a Wonderful Life that's looking at, or A Christmas Carol that's looking at values of life and friendship. And so It's a Wonderful Life, there's this line in it from Zuzu, whenever you hear a bell, an angel gets its wings. It's sweet, it's kind of classic, people know that line, and yet theologically does not match up with our biblical understanding. Netflix just released a trailer about a week ago for a brand new Christmas movie. I think it's The Boy Who Found Christmas, or the boy who something Christmas, and it's a Nicholas. And the first line is, this woman's telling the story to the children. Till 200 years ago, we had never heard of Christmas until Nicholas found the elves. And I went, wait, what? No. I mean, it's cute. I'm going to watch it. It's going to be delightful. But and these statements seep into our cultural ethos and affect how we view the world, God, even scripture. And so the first question this Lee Strobel addressed tonight is not just movies, but what has captivated Christian principles, Christian teachings about the birth of Jesus when we picture that first Christmas. And I'm going to step up for a second, because right behind me is a nativity. So right up there, you got your Mary and Joseph, you've got Jesus, you've got the shepherds showing up, you've got the wise men showing up, all together. And that is, who's seen that picture before? Yeah, everybody's nodding, their hands are up. You might be...
Don't we have 4 of those at home?
My husband has totally outed me as having 4 nativities at home, which I do not think is enough. The next question to ask is, how many advent calendars do we have at home?
6.
I got one for the dog and one for Michael.
That's okay. So we have this nativity one. So every day we put a paper craft of the nativity up for our advent. We have a online one. We have a Hershey Kiss one that has 2 kisses each day, so one for Alex and one for myself. We have a flat paper one that goes on the fridge. We have a Christmas candle that counts down. You burn a little bit every day. And my last one, which might be one of my favorite, is the fact that it's this online Jacqueline. Who is it, Susie? The nativity, it says the London one. Yes. Who is it? That's Jack. I don't know who it is, but it's delightful. And every day you find a different ornament online, and there's all these little puzzles and things. Last year it was a Nordic Christmas, and you found gnomes and okay. I like Advent.
Can't forget the one that the church family.
Oh, and the Christmas coloring book that we printed out for the children. I made sure I had one so that I could color a new Christmas picture every day. So even as we were talking about how we have these pictures of what the first Christmas would have looked like, the idea that the wise men and the shepherds show up at the same time is inaccurate. My aunt has put in the comments, the wise men probably didn't show up till 2 years later. And that wasn't addressed tonight in our video, and I'm going to give a summary of our video. But that is a prime example of this picture that is in our heads that doesn't match it. My dad has put the answer in. Jackie Lawson cards, which is absolutely delightful. If you haven't got your Advent calendar, it's an online one. You go, and if you miss a day, you can just find 2 ornaments the next day. It is delightful. And then, okay, that's not what tonight's about. I'll talk to you after if you want to hear more about my amazing Advent calendar. I'm going to read through some of the summaries. The first one that he brings up is, and this is based on a lot of understanding of Middle Eastern cultures, but also biblical, that time period. Hospitality was considered one of the highest traits. You would, even if an enemy came in need to your house, you would invite them in, offer them a meal, even if you were feuding. And there's a lot of cultural evidence of that in different people's writings. So having Mary and Joseph come into town, it would have been unthinkable for any person of Bethlehem to turn away a pregnant woman seeking shelter. That the person who did that would have been ostracized. That was new information to me. I don't know if that was new to anyone else, but it completely makes sense of the things I know about Middle Eastern cultures, not just Judaism, but that place, that time period, even now, modern days, hospitality is of such high value. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've never put that cultural knowledge in place with the biblical story. So what is happening in Luke's gospel? Well, something that he brings out is there's this word and it's in Greek and it starts with a K, and I'm not going to pronounce it well. Lee Strobel did, because he was on a professional video and he had somebody tell him how to say the Greek word. Catalema? I've got people giving me a thumbs up that I said it almost right. I used to preach at a church where one of the attendees in the church taught Greek at the divinity college in the next town over. He was always very good not to call me out when I said things wrong. I also made big practice of not actually saying Greek in person. So the word katalema is in our scriptures, in the early part of Luke where it's talking about them looking for a place to stay, is translated as an inn, which makes us think of a business, a bed and breakfast, or a commercial building that rents out rooms, a lodging house, which is why we think of an innkeeper turning away this poor, pregnant, about to burst woman, when in fact, the word could be translated as guest room or spare room, like in how we would have it. And so he just went through in the video, this beautiful idea of how a Jewish home would be set up. And was that new information to anybody here? I've got some, yes, there was some, I had heard it about 3 or 4 years ago, but the person who was saying it didn't back up where they were getting the information. I'm like, okay, I like that. That sounds really impressive and neat, but I don't know what to do with that information outside of this. So how it was is, this is your house, and your house would have 2 sections, a lower section with stairs coming up and a main family room. And this room would be slanted with an entrance and an exit to the pens, where at the end of the day you would bring in your sheep and your goats and your cows. You wouldn't have pigs because you're a good Jewish family, and that you just wouldn't have bacon. Hello. Sorry, did you just come on?
Yeah, I think that was you.
Oh, hi. So it would slant out, and your animals would come in, and there'd be a little manger feeding trough there, and then you'd go up the steps, and there'd be the family room where the family would sleep and eat. And the stairs would mean that sometimes your goats or your sheep would come up, so there'd also be a feeding trough on the next level. So that was the room. Then, over time, people who had the good evening, who had the resources would sometimes build an extra room onto the family room that would have not an adjoining door this way, like I go from my room into the living room, into the kitchen. It would just be a wall, and then you'd use an external outdoor to go into the guest room, and that would be for guests, family who have come from away. And so when they say that there was no guest room available, it makes sense. People have come in for the census, family and relatives have put people up in their spare rooms, the extra room, but you wouldn't turn away Mary and Joseph, so they would have come in and been in this room, and the place to put a baby that's safe would be this feeding trough in the family section. So that totally starts to change my view of Mary's pregnancy. She would have had maybe a family friend or a relative there. There probably would have been a midwife. There would have been community support around them. It's not them out in the barn with like the mice and the sheep and nothing else, and Joseph going, I don't know what to do. I always felt bad for Joseph in that original situation. How does this look? So that was his first big part of the video. The next thing that he really highlighted was the fact that we always have this urgency, like they're just getting into town, traveling with her at 8 or 9 months, and the day they show up in Bethlehem is the day her water breaks, and she's starting to go, we need a room and we need it now. But there is no biblical evidence for that story or image. That's kind of things we've tacked on over the years, because Luke says, well, they were there. They could have been there 10 days. They could have been there not 10 years, but they could have been there for 10 weeks. We don't have a concept of when this happens. Luke doesn't portray this as an emergency situation, but that arose as they approached the village. I think that's where we can end that one. And I didn't hear this one. Did you ever grow up with the image of a nativity in the cave? I've seen this in a couple different pictures sometimes. I'm most familiar with a stable or a barn of some kind. But sometimes you'll see, I wonder if it's in the Jesus film, the one that was made in the 60s, if it's a cave. I know I've seen some short films with a nativity that they're in a cave and that it was outside of town because there was no inn in the town. So that narrative, that imagery isn't, again, from the Gospels. There's no words for that in it that would make us think that from the scripture. It's not actually mentioned in the Gospels, a cave. The cave as an idea came about from an apologist, Justin the Martyr, who was writing much later. He was not writing off eyewitness accounts. He was explaining something to his best understanding in the 2nd century. So that's where that idea comes from. Okay. So yeah, that's the foundation. Then Lee Strobel talks a lot about what Pastor Thomas preached about on Sunday, just when we look at the eyewitness accounts, can we trust Luke and Matthew, not just in how they wrote, how old are these Gospels? And he breaks it down to, if Luke was writing Acts had to be written by about 63 AD because Paul is still alive at the end of the book of Acts. Jerusalem hasn't been destroyed, which happens and there's a war that isn't mentioned in the book of Acts, that these are significant events. Luke would have made reference to them, which means he ended beforehand. So Acts is written by 63 AD. The Gospel of Luke came before that because Acts is the sequel. I almost said prequel. Sequel. Acts happens after the Gospels. And that the time difference is only about, like, if Jesus died between 30 and 33 AD and he's writing late 50s, there's a shorter time period, and Mark wrote it beforehand. Interesting things, all to say that sometimes critics say it's been a long time between the life of Jesus and when the gospel got wrote, and really it's a shorter period. And then the next point he was making was looking in the archaeology of, can we trust, does archaeology back up what's in the scriptures? And I'm going to preach about that on Sunday, so I'm going to be done there. So here are some questions. Oh, I already asked that question. I've already asked that question. We already had these discussions. What are your thoughts about the reliability of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Do you view the gospel account as trustworthy, Or do you have some questions or doubts? And it's okay if maybe you do have doubts. If you're watching this, especially if you just listen to this information or me rattle it off, you're like, Liz, you just rambled. I have no idea what you're talking about. And if that's you, that's okay too. I find what Lee Strobel does, and I'm going to say this on Sunday too, so you're going to get a sneak peek at one of the things. Sometimes, like this thing about the archaeology, or the thing about how long it has been from when Jesus to now, it's an interesting piece of thread. It doesn't really solidify my faith. For me, when I was in doubt, can I trust Scripture? It was interesting. But if I only pulled on one piece, I could break it. I'm like, okay, sure, but what do I do with that? However, when I take the archaeology with the eyewitness, these people had, if Luke is writing well, eyewitnesses are alive, people who still remember Jesus. There'd be the availability for people to come up and say, you know what, I talked to Mary, you got it wrong. And there aren't that type of outspoken critics about his claim. Contemporaries who were still alive. John never outs Luke as a liar. Those are the type of things that this means about how young it is when they write, is Luke's writing and Peter and James and all these disciples are still alive. If Luke is lying, they can say, he got it wrong, and they don't. So that's some of those pieces. So I take that thread and I mix it with archaeology finds that back up where Luke says things happen. One of the big ones for this is, for a long time, people thought Luke was wrong because Nazareth doesn't become a town in biblical or in ancient writings until about the 4th century. There is no mention of Nazareth as a town in the Old Testament. There is no writings or scholarly works using the name Nazareth until about the 4th century. Obviously, that town couldn't exist. Luke's a liar, and we can just all throw the Bible out. Or at least that's what skeptics have said. And repeatedly, there's been more than once where people are like, Luke got it wrong. There's one about a politician that I'm going to talk about on Sunday. But on this one, Nazareth didn't exist, so Luke can't be trusted with something as simple as the name of a town. He got this wrong. We can't trust him with anything. That is where a skeptic took it. And in 2006, they were doing some excavating and found a 1st century Jewish home, and there's different things that they found that actually show Luke wasn't lying. Sometimes the archaeology hasn't been found to back it at the time somebody's being skeptical, but often over time this comes. So I take this eyewitness thing and am I popping? Do you want me to hold it like this? Is that better?
Sure, we'll try that.
Okay. I will try not to breathe heavy. I take this strand about the eyewitness, and then I take this information about the archaeology, and I start braiding them together. And together, these little pieces that are interesting tidbits become a... Thank you, Ian. He has informed me that I am cutting out and popping. We're trying to take care of it. So you thread them together, and our faith is stronger because of all the pieces together. And sometimes I have to trust other people to give me information. Like, I didn't know the archaeology thing till tonight. I didn't know some of these other pieces till tonight. We are going to be looking at more of them. Was there something else I wanted to talk about? There is some between the sessions personal study things that they offer as a think about these things this week. One of them is, can you trust the accuracy of the gospel accounts? No, it starts with, you can trust the accuracy of the gospel accounts. Thus, you can trust the accuracy of the Bible. What difference does that make in the way you live your life? Things to ponder this week. How does trusting the Bible affect your home life? Does it affect your life at work? How about your friendships? And what was the biggest thing you learned this week? So those are some things you can think about this coming week. Any, looking out to Alex and some of the others here, anything stood out to you from the video tonight?
I only caught the tail end of it, so.
Right. There were words. It was about Christmas. Alex had to come in late, but I think that's a good summary of our movie study tonight. If you are in the North Grenville or Greater North Grenville area and would like to actually watch the videos with us, we're doing that every Tuesday night leading up till Christmas at 7 p.m. And then at 7:30, you can join us again next week for a fuller discussion. Yes, this is definitely a little different than our normal book club. I'm still working out the formatting on how to get people involved. The questions, I might write my own for next week. So we'll see how that goes. I am definitely wanting to hear next week what your favorite Christmas song or Christmas carol is. That is next week's question. Come with the answer. I don't have a tie-in to next week's lesson at all or lesson video at all. I just want to know, what's your favorite Christmas song? So we will see you again next week, 7:30 online and 7 in person. So bye, friends.